During this course, we use brush a lot. It's very useful to know how to work with brush setting. It will help you to define your own brush and paint a lot of objects more easily. First of all, let's talk about the spacing. Spacing is the space between every single brush mark. If I increase the spacing, the space between every brush mark will change. Look at this setting. If I increase the spacing, you can see the space between every brush stroke change. Next item is roundness. By changing the roundness, you can squeeze your brush. Another item is angle. By changing the angle, you can change the angle that each brush mark has. As you can see, I change it here. Another item is in shape dynamic. You have an item called size jitter. Jitter means randomness. If you increase the size jitter or size randomness, the size of the brush mark will be randomly created on the canvas. When the size jitter is 0, all of the sides are at the same size. But if I increase the randomness and I paint, some of them will be bigger and some of them will be smaller. Another item is pen pressure. If you activate pen pressure with less pressure, the size will be smaller, and with more pressure, the size will be bigger. To use this option, you need to have a tablet. A mouse doesn't support this item because a mouse is not sensitive to pen pressure. You don't need to buy expensive tools. Even with a very cheap tablet, you can use this item. Remember, art is not about buying expensive tool. It's about practice and seeing a lot of reference and update every day your skills. Control is set to off. When I draw, all of them are at the same size. But when I set it to pen pressure, if I increase the pressure, the size of the brush mark will increase. Another item is minimum diameter. It controls the minimum size of every brush mark. The minimum diameter is 0. If I increase it, as you can see in here, the minimum size of the brush mark increase. Now, even with a very low pressure, the size of the brush will be much bigger than this one. Another item is angle jitter. Again, jitter means randomness. When you increase the percentage, brush marks will be painted on the canvas on a random angle. This is with 0 angle jitter, and if I increase it, this is with angle jitter. Another setting that is very useful is setting control to direction. If you set control to direction, the brush mark will follow the direction of your hand when you paint. If I set it to direction, you can see that they are following my hand. For example, if I change the angle here, and I come here and set it to direction, and maybe I increase spacing. As you can see, the brush mark is painted on a canvas in a way that I feel it is following my hand direction. Another setting that I can change is scattering. If I increase the percentage, if you paint, the position of the brush mark will have a space from each other. If I set it to pen pressure, as you can see here, with less pressure, the space between brush mark depends on the pressure I apply to the screen. So with less pressure they are close to each other, but with more pressure, with more pen pressure, the space between every brush mark will be increased and they will be randomly created on the canvas. This is with 0%. Then I increase it. I don't apply too much pressure. No, I apply too much pressure. Now you can see we have more space between every brush marks. If you tick both axes, it will happen in both X and Y direction. First, I don't apply too much pressure. Now I apply a lot of pressure. As you can see, the position of the brush mark will be very random. What is very useful here, especially when you work with foliage, is this item count. If I increase it, as you can see in the preview, the number increase randomly. So even with just simple brush stroke, I will have a lot of brush mark on the screen. And if I combine it in a right way with other item, I can very easily create item like foliage or leaves. Another useful item is transfer. If you set the control to pen pressure, you can control the opacity of your brush marks with the pressure you apply to your tablet. As you can see, with more pressure, the opacity increases. If you set the control to pen pressure and you see this warning, it means that the Photoshop doesn't recognize your tablet, or Photoshop thinks you are working with a mouse. As you can see, it says control by pen pressure requires the use of a pressure sensitive tablet. So, as I said, with an even very cheap tablet, you can use the benefit of this item. As I said, if I set control to pen pressure, the pressure I apply will control the opacity of the brush marks. Again, we have jitter here, opacity jitter, and it controls the randomness of the brush marks. So this is without randomness, and if I increase it, it still depends on the pressure I apply and also this randomness setting. As we said, minimum control the minimum opacity, so if I increase it, the minimum opacity depends on this range. So if I increase it, the minimum of the brush mark opacity will increase. For the last tip, I want to talk about the changing the size of the brush using shortcut. There are several ways. One way is to hold Alt, then hold button on your tablet or right click, and then move horizontally the pen over the tablet surface. This is a good way, but I personally prefer to use the square bracket. By pressing open or close square bracket, I can easily change the size of the brush.